we have a time and we have a physical space dedicated solely to that. We do this every day without fail since 1972. Wow. Like I said, I started this program last fall, and I'm just finishing my fourth class now, so fourth term. So it's only been 16 months. And I can say I didn't start meditation right from the get-go. So for me, it's definitely a more sporadic practice. I'd love to do more regularly, but I'm not quite there yet. But I am fascinated, and I am very, very interested, and I'm developing my own schedule, own practice that I think I hope to continue with. But yeah, it's definitely become a big part of my life. Definitely a part of my life, and um, how it grows or how it develops, I don't know yet. So, but that's impressive since 1972 every day. So we're almost to the end, and I think this is good because I'm losing my voice and I'm getting really tired right now. So hopefully this will help. I've been trying to balance a full-time job. A lot of my peers are too. At least I don't have kids yet. Some of my peers do. And but getting ready for the baby, and driving to doctor's appointments with my wife, and my parents are visiting for to see the kid, and all this kind of stuff, and end of year kind of things. Right, this is mid-December now. It's been a challenge, and a part of the reason why I wanted to do more of a dialogue type video slash audio slash very raw kind of thing like this was I wanted to still engage with the material. I still wanted to engage with my class, but at the same time I wanted to do something that won't take quite as long or won't take quite as much revision. So I'm going to come clean. It's a bit of a dual purpose here. But I'm just so fascinated with so many of the things that we're talking about, and I'm literally bursting at the seams sometimes to just talk to somebody about some of this, and some of these ideas and some of the thoughts that are in my head and some of the learning that I'm getting. So oftentimes I'll grab coworkers or my poor wife and talk their ears off, trying to tell them and have dialogue about this stuff. So one of the reasons why I'm doing this. This took a lot longer than I thought, so I apologize for such a long video. Hopefully you're enjoying it. We're almost there, so I've got a couple more paragraphs to go through here. At 14:16, Charles says, getting away from cell service, so phone cell service, this is an interesting point. Addiction to screens is now a real problem in our society. It's not just addiction to screens, but more deeply an inability of people to handle not being distracted by something. This is very disturbing. Folks are losing the ability to be alone with themselves, and all this entails. And he says, yes, we are losing the ability to focus. Again, this is an enormous problem. I'll admit I am addicted to my phone. It's very hard for me to feel secure or feel it's like those addiction kind of things. I feel naked without my phone. I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. I think part of it is because I need to be reachable. I'm a firstborn. All the way growing up, ever since high school, I always had a cell phone, and back in the mid to late 2000s, I guess, we had those brick Nokia phones, those indestructible ones. And I was one of the first ones to have it in my class. So, this is way back. But it wasn't because, I was the cool kid or I was the affluent kid or anything like that. It was because my parents needed to get a hold of me because I was a big part of the family business. I think that just kind of stuck. So for me, if I can't reach somebody or if other people can't reach me, that brings with it a lot of stress and anxiety. But of course, it's more than that. I love my devices, my tablets, my cell phone, my computer, and most of my entertainment comes in some form of a screen. And I think being more mindful of that and trying to get away from it is important. What he's talking about here is there are times, increasingly rare and more rare, where I can liberate myself from being connected. So it's not so much the screen. I mean, the screen is a big part of it, and anything to do with the screen is a big part of it. But if I could focus on the idea of being connected, being always connected, I think that's the part. And sometimes being liberated from it can be hard. So for those of us that work and have a full-time job or a day job, I would liken it to the idea of, like, if you're very busy and you've been going nonstop at your work for a very long time, sometimes it takes a few days or a week, or depending on who you are and what kind of job you do, I suppose. It takes a while, several days sometimes, before I feel like I can disconnect. I can decouple myself from work, so that when I'm on vacation, right? I'm not worrying about what's going on at work, not worrying about what I need to do when I get back and all that kind of stuff. I can just be me. And increasingly, the older I get, the harder that becomes, I think. I'm 34 years old now, and been working full-time for 9 years or something like that, since graduation. And even when I was in school, I was working full-time almost throughout the entire 8 years of my undergrad. So the older I get, I think, the harder it becomes for me to really find out what it means to be myself without the screens, without blending. I want to say that it's blending of my different selves. So my professional self, my personal self, and maybe my online self. And I think the online involves gaming, it involves some of the friends that I know and have all over the world, and all of that. So social media, the whole bit. So being alone with yourself, being alone with your thoughts, like Charles is saying, I think that's becoming increasingly rare and increasingly difficult. And I don't know if that's good. I know for me it's not, and I don't like it. But at the same time, it feels like, how do you not do it? Right? How do you not do it? So that's a big question. That's a big question. Two more. 1434, he says, you mentioned several practices like martial arts, yoga, etc. as means of having contemplation. Okay, but what is the purpose of contemplation? You mentioned these practices having spiritual and contemplative aspects. Interesting. So what is spirituality about? Do the practices serve intentionally to have a spiritual or contemplative focus, or is this just a byproduct? I think it's valuable to think about this. I think it depends, obviously. So I want to comment on a few things. I mean, like I've been doing for the entire video, a lot of this stuff that's coming out here right now is my ideas and my opinion. But the purpose of contemplation, I think, is to reflect, to think, to go deeper than our day-to-day selves. I think there's multi-levels of being and of awareness. Contemplation lets us tap into the deeper, more fundamental, more real, more important parts of ourselves, our being. Right? And I think contemplation and contemplative practices allows us to tap into those, and to reconnect with those, almost kind of like what I was just talking about decoupling and all that kind of stuff from the distractions. The spiritual aspects of contemplative practices, and like I mentioned before, whether it's driving or doing the dishes or martial arts or yoga, I think some of them have more spirituality infused into it. I think definitely martial arts has some spirituality, spiritual elements, for sure. Yoga, I think, of course, religious practices and mass or other religious ceremonies. The spirituality, what is it about? Well, and then he goes on to say, do the practices serve intentionally to have a spiritual or contemplative focus, or is it a byproduct? It's a byproduct for some of these, right? So I'm not suggesting here that driving is a innately spiritual endeavor. I think it's a byproduct, or at least for a car guy like me, driving can become quite a spiritual, very contemplative process. Maybe some others who aren't car people will also agree as well. So again, it's a byproduct, but and it's not necessarily intentionally spiritual, or normally it's not a spiritual practice, but it can be. So then that means you can really make almost anything a spiritual practice and almost anything a contemplative practice, right? Um, so what is spirituality about? I don't know. Spirituality, I think it's religion. I think it's about explaining things that we can't explain, maybe. Um, I don't know. I don't know what spirituality is all about. Uh, I think it's a lot of things. I think it's a lot of things, and I think it's a lot of things that we can't explain. It's a lot of things that gives us hope. I think it's a lot of things that helps us fill in the blanks of our knowledge of. Um, I think because we're self-aware, right? Because we are self-aware, we're aware of our mortality. We're aware of the passing of time. We're aware of who we are. Um, I think with that comes a lot of questions and a lot of baggage and a lot of things we need to work out as individuals and as a society in general. I think spirituality maybe fills some of those gaps that we have. And I think it evolves over time. You know, living in the modern world and in the current, in 2016, it is probably very different than what was modern in, 1916 or, you know, 1816. So I think spirituality evolves, and what spirituality is about is, I guess the best way I can describe, or that I think about, is it's it's filling in the gaps. It's filling in the gaps of our knowledge. It's filling in the gaps of some of the questions that we have as self-aware beings. Yeah. Okay. Last post, or last comment on this first video, audio clip. 1505. He says, your points about all of these practices, even cooking and chores, giving you the space, is a valuable one. It seems to me then that a key is figuring out what elements of these practices allows them to be or become contemplative and focus on those, perhaps making sure that they are present. Yeah, and I think that's a good question. So the key is figuring out what elements of these practices allows me to be or become more contemplative and focus on those. And I think it's got to be done consciously, right? Because like I said, sometimes you can kind of stumble into it, I think, where you can stumble into a very contemplative, very mindful practice. But most of the time you have to do it very consciously. So then, what is the key element? I think the key element is maybe twofold. One is you have to be conscious. You have to do it consciously, right? You have to try and do it consciously, even though sometimes you can do it without being very mindful and conscious about engaging with it. And then the second part is doing something that doesn't involve a lot of thinking. And that's why I think those repetitive practices, like doing the dishes, you've done it a million times, so you don't really need to think too much about it, and you can do it. Driving, same kind of idea. You know how sometimes you drive and come home and you don't realize how you got home, but I'm sure you were safe and you drove home, and it was almost like muscle memory. And I think that frees you up to engage with this thing that is quite deep and can be quite resource heavy, I guess. So yeah, I think those are the key things. So you can't be doing something that's brand new or whatnot. So yeah, that's how I'd answer that. So that's the end of the first contemplation definition part one audio. So my initial audio clip was 15 minutes and 28 seconds. Charles has put 29 comments on that, which is amazing, and I loved reading through these. These were so good, and I felt, obviously we're not communicating live, right? Where he and I are talking to each other live. But I thought this was an interesting thing because I think you lose a little bit of something here because you can clarify, both of us, his comments as well as mine, if we were in person. But at the same time, I think this allows us to kind of contemplate and reflect and think about some of the things that we're talking about here, and allows us to kind of collect our thoughts and to respond in a more thoughtful way and in a slower pace, as you can see by how long this video is. So yeah, this has been a very long video, but I really enjoyed it, and I think I've grown again, and I've learned a lot about this definition and this idea, and I think I'm getting clearer about my own practices and what I'm doing. So I really enjoyed this. So yeah, and I hope that other than just having audio, having this video and my facial expressions, I think maybe next time I'll sit back a little bit more so you can see where I can be a little bit more. I talk with my hands a lot. With my body language, you can see more of it. I think I'm just looking at how I'm framed here, and it's quite narrow, so I didn't get to do a lot of that. But again, it's been an interesting experiment. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Okay, thank you.